In the third part of this lesson, we will focus on the production of mud bricks and the variability observed in their manufacture. We will see how the study of manufacturing marks can assist archaeologists in identifying the gestures of the brickmakers and in characterizing the different stages of the chaîne opératoire in ancient Nubia. In mud brick production, the chaîne opératoire is generally standardized. Preparation of the mixture, filling the mold, molding, unmolding, and sun drying. However, variations can occur in most of these stages, depending on the building culture. These variations can be influenced by factors such as the type of temper, the quality of the mixture, and the kind of mold used. Therefore, there is no single way for molding a mud brick. First, depending on the type of temper used, the mixture may be left to rest for 1 or more days. This is not the case when the temper is sand. When, on the contrary, is straw to be mixed with soil and water, the mixture often ferments for 1 or more days in order to improve its cohesion and strength. Second, the quality of the mixture determines whether mud bricks are water molded or sand molded. In water molding, the paste is semi-soft and after each unmolding, the mold is wetted with water. Due to the relatively high water content of the mixture, it must be carefully prepared to prevent too much shrinking during the drying stage. In sand molding, the mixture is semi-solid and generally contains less water than in water molding. Here, the mold is sprinkled with sand before the brick is molded. In addition, the brickmaker also dusts the earth lumps with sand before putting them in the mold. Third, the type of mold can also vary across different building cultures. Molds can be made of wood or metal and can be either single-handled or double-handled, for example. In the image at the bottom right, you can see double molds, but multiple molds with 4 or more compartments are also known in vernacular traditions. Now, it is important to note that manufacturing marks can vary depending on both the kind of molding technique and the type of mold used. In Sudan and Egypt, there has been a long-lasting tradition of single-handled wooden molds. In the two images at the top right, you can see a specimen from contemporary Sudan alongside one from Egypt. These molds are almost identical, and thanks to archaeological evidence, we know that this same type of mold was used in ancient Egypt as well. Therefore, it is very likely that single-handled molds were also employed in ancient Nubia. Before we examine the manufacturing marks on bricks, I would like to briefly focus on how to unmold when using a single-handled mold. As you will see, in this case, for a beginner, the unmolding gesture is much less intuitive than with two-handled molds. If you have never molded a brick using a single-handled mold, you will likely find the task challenging the first time. After attempting unsuccessfully with just one hand, at some point, as shown in the second image on the left, you will probably resort to using both hands to lift the mold. And yet, even in this way, the gesture will not be easy or swift. You may wonder why a single-handled mold is used when unmolding is so much easier with a two-handled one. This apparent inconsistency is due to our unawareness of the right gesture to make. The solution to this small puzzle can be found in the following two videos. The first one was filmed in a brick factory in Egypt in 2021, and the second in Dukigel in Sudan in 2022. In both cases, the brickmaker uses a wooden single-handled mold, but I would like to highlight an important difference. In Egypt, the bricks are water molded, whereas in Dukigel they are sand molded. Let's start with the first video. Pay close attention to the unmolding gesture. Instead of using both hands, the brick maker unmolds the brick with just one hand by tilting the mold. This is done effortlessly and swiftly. You will also notice that before refilling the mold, he cleans it with water. Now we will watch the same gesture performed by the brickmaker of Dukigel. You will notice that in this case the brickmaker does not use water at all as he is sand molding. He dusts the mold with sand before filling it and does the same with the earth lumps before putting them in the mold. However, the unmolding gesture is identical to that performed by the Egyptian brickmaker. These two videos are extremely helpful in illustrating the correct way to handle this tool. Had we not observed the brickmakers in action, we would still be puzzled and unable to comprehend how the single-handled mold functions. As a last remark on this point, thanks to this evidence, we also know that the single-handled mold is suitable for both techniques, water molding and sand molding. If there is not a single way for molding a mud brick, how can we determine how ancient builders made their bricks, especially since we cannot observe anymore the production as it takes place? The answer lies in the mud bricks themselves. When well preserved, various marks are visible on their surfaces. These marks are essential for the archaeologist, as they help reconstruct the sequence of actions involved in the production of the mud brick under study. They may have been left by the mold, the hands of the brickmaker, or the drying surface. When correctly interpreted, these marks can provide insight into the gestures of the brickmaker and the context of the production area. This approach has already been applied in other geographical regions with very interesting results. In the case of the ancient Nile Valley, however, this line of research, although in its early stages, it is very promising. Before we examine in the following slides some examples of these marks and the information they reveal, I would like to address a question that may have come to mind. Why it is important to reconstruct in such detail the actions involved in mud brick productions? The answer lies in the cultural identity of the brick makers. By accurately characterizing the way a mud brick was produced, we can also characterize the way the brick maker worked, and this offers us a glimpse into his or her cultural identity. This allows to distinguish between different productions from one site to another, or across different historical periods, and may even help identifying production practices associated with distinct cultural groups. Now, let's take a closer look at these marks. As part of the Nile's project, I have documented various marks on ancient mud bricks from Sai Island and Kermadukigel. To identify these marks correctly, I have drawn upon observations made by scholars working in the Near East alongside an updated classification system developed by the archaeologist Emmanuel Baudouin, which incorporates evidence from the Neolithic Southern Caucasus. As anticipated, not all the marks found on mud bricks in the Near East can be directly compared to those observed on Nubian examples. This indicates that there were differences in the mud bricks production between these two geographical regions. Consequently, I was compelled to create a new classification specifically for the mud bricks of the Nile Valley. In this and the following slides, I will first present the marks that resemble to those found in the Near East, followed by those specific to the Nubian tradition. To begin with, the marks on all the bricks I examined indicated that they had been molded, rather than hand-shaped. This is consistent with what we have already discussed in the second part of this lesson. To date, there is no evidence of hand-shaped mudbricks in ancient Nubia. Marks left by the mold are relatively easy to identify. As you can see in the image on the left, water molding typically leaves a series of light vertical lines on the side faces of the brick. The very well preserved mud brick shown on the right comes from a building in Dukigel dating to the kingdom of Napata. On its upper face, you can observe longitudinal scraping marks, likely made by the brickmaker's hand just prior to unmolding, in order to remove the excess of paste and to smooth the surface. Additionally, on the bottom edge, you can also observe the mark left by one of his or her fingers. To confirm that a mold has been used, one can also examine the top edges of the brick. As shown in the image on the left, when the mold is lifted, the unmolding often creates a bulge along the upper edges of the brick. Another very interesting mark I observed on a brick from Sai Island dating to the Egyptian New Kingdom is a similar bulge located along the bottom edges of the brick. Initially, I was uncertain about the interpretation of this mark. To investigate further, I examined mudbrick production conducted during the course of the Nile project and found that a comparable feature was present on the mudbricks we produced using the water molding technique. In the two images on the right, you can see the ancient brick on the top and the brick produced in 2022 at the bottom. The marks are strikingly similar. These are the four most uncommon marks also observed on ancient mud bricks from the Near East. However, with regard to the Nubian bricks I have studied, I would like to offer some additional observations which I believe are specific to the Nubian tradition. Some marks can provide additional insights into the molding process and the area where molding took place. For instance, the images on the left show the bottom and side faces of a mud brick sampled from Kerma Cemetery of Sai Island. In this case, the side faces allow for two significant observations. First, the cracks highlighted in light blue indicate that the mold was not completely filled in a single time, but rather with at least 3 different earth lumps. During drying, the mud brick shrunk slightly, causing cracks along the edges of each lump. Second, on the same side faces, one can observe that the brick's thickness is uneven. This suggests that the molding area was not leveled off. Furthermore, if we examine the bottom face of the same brick in the image at the bottom left, we can see that it is also quite uneven, with at least 2 cavities left by 2 pebbles. The side and the bottom faces of this brick, therefore, indicate that not only was the molding area not leveled, but also that no supporting material, such as a layer of sand or vegetal mats, as it is commonly used in other regions of the world, was employed. It is likely that the brick was molded directly on the ground without any specific preparation. The final example I wish to discuss in this section of the lesson is still under investigation and requires further field observations. In the case of the mud brick from Sai Island on the right, I observed that, like on several other mud bricks from Sai, the vertical lines left by the mold on the brick side face are visible on only one of the 2 long sides of the brick. One possible explanation for this is that, At some point during the drying stage, the brick was rotated and placed on one of its long sides to expedite the drying process. As the brick was still somewhat wet, the contact with the ground may have erased the molding marks. As I mentioned, this remains a hypothesis, and further field observations and tests are needed to verify it. To conclude this section, I would like to stress that I have only presented the most common marks found on brick surfaces. There are others that I have not discussed, which require further study and experimentation for proper interpretation. The study of marks on mud bricks from the Nile Valley is still in its early stages and needs additional research. However, I hope to have demonstrated the potential of this approach and encourage you in future excavations involving mud bricks to carefully observe and record any mark you find. If you have the chance to discover mud bricks in a good state of conservation, seize the opportunity to document all the information you can. This data will assist you in characterizing the chaîne opératoire and may also help identify potential hand-shaped bricks. As we have already noted, there is no evidence of hand-shaped bricks from ancient Sudan to date. Nevertheless, it is good practice for an archaeologist working with mud bricks to always check whether they have been molded or hand-shaped, even if the former is more likely. There are two reasons for this. First, it may allow you to identify unexpected hand-shaped bricks in a particular context. Second, bricks of special form, as the trapezoidal bricks found in pharaonic grain silos in Sai Island, or those used for columns, are known in the literature. However, we are still uncertain about how they were produced and whether, in these cases, they were hand-shaped, molded, or perhaps cut to achieve the desired shape. If you encounter these types of bricks, studying the marks will be invaluable in understanding their production. As with the examples I have shown, there will be marks that are difficult to interpret. In such cases, the experimentation with the production of new bricks can be a valuable and helpful tool to aid in their understanding. In this lesson, we have seen that both cob and mud brick techniques used in ancient Nile Valley belong to a broader range of earthen building techniques. Both these techniques were employed in the past, continue to be used today, and are integral to the building cultures of Sudan. However, numerous variants of cob exist. Similarly, even though mud brick production is quite standardized, technical gesture and practices can vary from one region of the world to another, depending on factors such as the type of mixture, molding, and mold used. These variations are closely tied to the different human groups and cultures that have used or continue to use these techniques. So, why is it important for an archaeologist to characterize ancient building techniques and processes? The answer lies in the fact that to characterize these techniques is to characterize the building cultures themselves. When we refer to building cultures, we are considering the act of construction as a cultural practice. In this context, architecture is inherently linked to the geographical and climatic environment of the human group responsible for it, and thus to the local building materials available. Architecture, therefore, is the product of a specific social and cultural group making use of those local materials. By understanding how these groups built, we can infer who the builders were and to which culture they belonged. For example, we will be able to distinguish between pharaonic and Nubian earthen construction, and also identify regional and cultural specificities, monitor changes, and trace the evolution of these practices over time. As this lesson draws to a close, I would like to provide you with a list of references related to the topics covered in these lectures, along with 2 video resources that you may find useful. You may pause the video if you wish to take note of the references listed on this slide and the following one. Where possible, I have included resources that are available for download or can be read online. I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I encourage you to watch the next 3 lectures in this course. Thank you very much for your attention, and goodbye.